All right, well, welcome to the Acumatica Developer Series. This is the first of many presentations that the engineering development team out of Moscow are planning for the next couple months. And Vladimir Perov, technical account manager, also known as developer extraordinaire, will be presenting the credit card processing enhancements in 2019 R1. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, at the bottom of your screen, approximately in the middle, there's a Q&A button you can click and you can type in your questions. We're going to answer the questions after the presentation, so I will be repeating the questions for Vladimir, and we'll end the presentation after we get through the questions. Somebody's asking me what developer extraordinaire means. It was just kind of a joke that we had before when we were starting how I should introduce Vladimir, just meaning that he's a really good developer, extraordinary developer, and I'm embarrassing him since we're recording this. It's going to be there in perpetuity, so he'll probably kill me when I show up in Russia next September. Anyway, questions, go ahead and enter them in the Q&A. We'll answer them at the end. This will be recorded and is being recorded. And once I have a chance to edit, I will get it up on the ADN site. So it's adn.acumatica.com. I sent that link to the email, so most of you should have that. If you forget, go ahead and email me at mfranks@acumatica.com. So without further ado, Vladimir, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Mark. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to tell you about credit card processing enhancements in 2019 R1. So we have several new features that I want to show you, and those features implementing of them required us to make some changes on the technical side. So there are new interfaces added to processing plugins, there are changes in business processes, new screens, and that's what I'm going to tell you about. So new features in 2019 R1 from the user standpoint, from technical standpoint. I will also share our plans for new features in the next release, 19 R2, which is going to be released in September. And also in 19 R2 we are going to deprecate some older features related to credit card processing, which are really not up to standards anymore because of mostly of security reasons. Okay. Let me go ahead. What we added in 19R1. So the major change is that we have a new way to add, actually to pay with a credit card from the application. Now it's just a one-step process that you can just bring up a pop-up and enter credit card data there, and it will be charged straight away. You don't need to create a customer payment profile first. We have added a new screen to synchronize credit cards with processing center. It can be used as a recovery tool for some issues with network connection when the system didn't manage to synchronize everything at once. The other usage of this tool is to synchronize initial data on a new installation of Acumatica. Also, credit card payments can now be accepted on mobile devices. It's just the first step of implementation. I will show you it to you. And everything is backward compatible, and all existing functionality that was in previous version is preserved as is. So let me show you how it works. So this is processing center screen. I'm sure all of you are aware. have seen it before, know how to use it. So what's new here? This is the same API plugin that we introduced in 17R2, sorry. And it uses the same base set of interfaces, and we just extended on that to add new functionality. So what's new here is this accept payment from new card checkbox. This is a checkbox that controls this new feature that I have mentioned. So if your plugin supports necessary sets of interfaces, this checkbox is now will be shown on the screen. And well, if you don't want that functionality to be available for some reason, you can just disable it. So this is a pretty simple setup. I have set a payment method and associated this with this processing center. And that's all the setup that is needed right now. So let me show you the actual capture process as it can be done right now. So I'll just copy this document, save us some time. So now what you can see is that there is a new card checkbox on payment screen. It's available only for payment methods that are associated with processing centers that support this new feature. Okay, so once I press it, UI is changed, so I cannot see the credit card selector anymore. Instead of that, I see processing center ID. What I can do now, if I press a capture or authorize a button, for this demo I'll press capture, I can just capture a payment from a new credit card straight away. So the system passed information about the document over to a processing center. As you can see, there is this number, the document number is the same as in Acumatica, and it passed over the total that will be charged from the credit card. So I'm creating a new credit card here. As you can see, the billing address is already passed to this form. It's the system got it from the customer screen where I set it up as a billing address. And when I now press pay, a system sends a request to a processing center to capture that sum from the credit card that I had just created. And after that, it also synchronizes that credit card with Acumatica. So now I can have it in the system and use it for later payments. This is this new functionality is available for now only on payment screen. But as I mentioned before, existing functionality is preserved as is. So if you want to capture credit cards from sales orders, sales invoices, or cash sales, you can do it just like you did before, but you will require to make that additional step of setting up a customer payment profile. Okay, now next feature I want to show you is synchronized payments, synchronized card screen. What it does, it fetches all the data from processing center to Acumatica and checks if there are some discrepancies between data in processing center and in our instance of Acumatica. So since I'm using my test account in AuthorizeNet, which I used extensively for testing over the years, there are a lot of stuff here that's present in processing center and not present in Acumatica. And you can see there, when system fetches a new record, it tries to guess the customer that's can be associated with particular credit card. It uses customer CD field from processing center to do that. And here you can see the data that was fetched from processing center. So what I can do now, I can, from this screen, I can make a new customer payment method from this data. So there are several required fields on customer payment methods that I need to specify, especially specifically payment method and cash account. So I set them here. I select this record. Okay, so just to show you that there is no cheating here, let's go to this customer and see that there are no credit card payments methods right now. And now when I process this, okay, so that was fast. And let's check. And here you go, we have a new credit card that was fetched from processing center. Okay, so for the next demo, I will show you actually, sorry, it's a not live demo because we had some technical difficulties with sharing the screen, the phone screen, but it's a recording from a previous demo we did, and it shows the same functionality that I'm going to talk about. So here it's our iPhone app that has now ability to capture payments that were created from sales orders. So I'll just start it and comment on what's happening on the go. So, okay, now I will, this is a new sales order will be created. So for doing that, we need to select the customer. We need to add some details, the regular stuff. Yeah, so for sales order, a lot of stuff should be inputted beforehand, so all the details are in place. Okay, once we have it, okay, once we have the details, we now have this new create payment button. You can see it down below. And when we push it, the system creates a new payment. Well, now the payment method is changed to, well, credit cards, and you see we have this new cards checkbox also available here. And now we have this capture CC payment button down below, and once we press it, the system redirects us to more or less the same payment screen that we have seen on the web version. And here we will be able to enter credit card data as we did before. So as you can see, it's the same. We have the payment number, we have a document total. We can enter credit card data here. Well, it requires several details. Well, as for billing address, you may have noticed that on web version it was pre-filled. On mobile version it's also pre-filled, but for that demo it wasn't filled out for the specific customer. So then we have this additional screen where user confirms that, well, user shown all the details and then he can continue back into application. And now, well, it takes, sometimes takes a bit. So you can see the payment was synchronized and now it has a status open and processing status captured. So that's how you can now work with a mobile app. This functionality is available out of the box. So once, if you have a processing center that supports this new function, these new interfaces, then it will be, this functionality will be automatically available both on web and on mobile. So no additional effort from your side is required. You only need to implement those new interfaces. And actually, talking about these new interfaces and what we did actually to implement all that. Well, first thing I want to mention is that all credit card functionality code was moved into reusable business objects. Well, I guess at this point this well, for you, this information is not very useful. I mean, you cannot build anything on top of that yet. We will extend that later, so potentially it will be possible to create your own screens and just strap or payment functionality on top of them, so you won't have to implement well, some coding will be required, of course, if you're familiar with reusable business objects. There is a mapping classes that should be implemented, but besides that, you will get that functionality and will be able to reuse it. I guess that's pretty awesome. Okay, so new set of interfaces. Let me show you actual code. So at the heart of this new functionality, there are three new interfaces. It's hosted payment form processor, transaction getter, and profile creator. Let me just, sorry, wasn't intended to do that. Sorry about that. That's the issue with live demos. Sometimes things go a little bit wrong. Okay. Okay, so new hosted payment form processor interface. It has a new method, a single method, get data for payment form. As an input, it gets processing inputs and it returns hosted form data. Processing input is the same data structure that you are using for do transaction method when you are processing the transactions. So it carries inside information about type of transaction, amount that is used for that transaction, ID of the currency, and here it also carries document data, customer data, and card data. In case of this particular method, only document data will be passed from Acumatica. So, and return value is hosted form data, and it's the same stuff that's used for already existing hosted form. It contains a caption, URL, token, and parameters that will be used to display this new hosted form. Okay, next interface is transaction getter. It has two methods. First one is get transaction, and second one is get unsettled transaction. So why there are two of them? Actually, scenario on web and on mobile is a little bit different. On web, we are retrieving the transaction ID from the iframe. So actually we are expecting that the iframe, the form will return that transaction ID back into Acumatica via the user interface. So this is how it's done on web, but on mobile there is no such option, and because of that we have to use another way, and we are just queuing all unsettled transaction based on a document. So filtering, getting all unsettled transaction and filtering them by that document that was used in the original transaction, and doing that we fetch back the transaction that was just created. So the return value is transaction data. It can be well, of course, there can be more than one unsettled transaction. All of them should be returned, and the parameters for search is actually offset and this ID. Okay, so just to mention that if you have noticed, we have annotations for older interfaces. There also will be annotations with more details on usage and examples here, but they will be added into RTW release, so it will be released in the beginning of March, and then you will have the annotations in code, and also API reference will be updated so that you can get all the details from there. Okay, and the final interface is Profile Creator. What it does, it uses that transactions that we retrieved earlier and asks the processing center to create a payment profile based on that transaction. And the parameters here is transaction ID and some additional parameters. In our case, it could be customer ID or customer CD, which I used for creation. Okay. That's it for demonstration. Also, I want to mention, on the previous slide, you may have seen that I mentioned basic support of webhooks. It's also initial steps of implementation of this functionality. It won't be extendable in 19R1. But in 19R2 we'll be adding a more generic approach, and it will become extendable, and you can build your own solutions based on that. Okay, and one thing that I wanted you to pay close attention to is this, the fact that for new form, Acumatica expects that a transaction ID will be returned from the hosted form. So this transaction ID actually passed via this callback with transaction response action, and put into a hidden field on the UI and then passed back to the server. And server expects that there is some value in there, and if value is not available, the processing won't work. Well, that's how it works on web version. For mobile version, it works a little bit differently. So what happens on mobile is that actually we're using WebView to redirect the user to a dedicated endpoint in Acumatica that in its turn shows the payment form. And after the user finishes working with the payment forms, it gets redirected to another dedicated endpoint where the synchronization is happening. So that's what I'm showing you right now. This is the code that does the synchronization. You can see we're querying the original document, and after that we are getting unsettled transactions for the processing center, and we are filtering them by document ID. So that's what's happening behind the scenes. Okay, that's all for code for now. Let me get back to my slides. So yeah, everything's covered. I have shown you everything there is to see here. Let's talk about new features that we are planning to develop in 2019 R2. So the main change, and it's change of a business process rather than change in interfaces or plugins, is that we will move all credit card processing functionality to AR payment and AR cash sale documents. So only from those documents, actions like authorize, capture, void, refund will be available. And for all other documents in the system like sales order, sales invoice, you will have to create a payment first. Well, of course, we will make this process streamlined, so you won't need to actually go creating the payment on your own. The user experience will be very similar to what it is now, but behind the scenes, those AR payment documents will be created. So, and we want to do it that way because our goal is to implement a new, more generic synchronization mechanism for credit card transactions so that we can synchronize that asynchronously. So we will have a scheduled process that does the synchronization, update status of transactions. In case something went wrong on the first try, it will be synchronized automatically later. And if we are looking a bit more into the future, we are planning to add more payment methods based on that mechanism, and the first idea is actually doing a better integration with ACH, for example. Well, and as an additional thing, we will implement an extended webhooks functionality that you can build your own applications on top of them. So it will be a more general feature of the platform, the webhooks, the configured webhooks. I mean, not the ones that we have already for notifications, where Acumatica sends out a request to an external webhook, but rather a case when Acumatica is a receiver of the webhook. So you can receive that webhook from an external application in case when you, for example, cannot control the payload. So if it's a big service like AuthorizeNet, and well, it has a set data format, and on receiving that webhook, it will be possible to set up code that will process that webhook and do some things in Acumatica. And we will also use that for synchronization with Processing Center. Well, but that's all is a bit in the future. So that's what we're planning for 19R2, and it's still half a year from now, and just not to raise your hopes up for too much. So if we if we see that it's too much to handle in one release, probably some things can get moved to later releases because we value the quality of our features more than quantity. Okay, and the last thing that I want to mention is features that will be deprecated in 19R2. And those are our own plugins that we have implemented before, which are now called AIM and CIM in the system. We will remove them. And the interfaces that those plugins were built upon will be deprecated and removed too. So this is specifically ICC payment processing interface and all functionality related to that. And we will we will change the upgrade process so that it will check if there are any customer payment methods that link to processing centers, that link to plugins that implement older interfaces, and it won't be possible to upgrade to a new version of Acumatica unless you have converted all your existing payment methods to new plugins. And sorry, that was too fast. Actually, there is a feature that was introduced quite some time ago, and it's a screen called Payment Method Converter. Just a second, I will show you that. So here it is, this Payment Method Converter screen. What it does, it's that for specific payment method, it can convert all customer payment methods that are linked to a specific processing center, and it converts those customer payment methods so that they will be linked to a new updated processing center. So for example, it's a sales demo database. So I have this Visa payment method that is linked to out.net processing center. And it uses first version of plugin. It's AIM plugin, and it's based on ICC payment processing interface. And so we can convert off customer payment methods from Visa payment method to use a new plugin. Well, I also want to mention that already in 19R1, oh, sorry, that happens all the time. In 19R1, when you are trying to use, trying to use this this older AIM plugin, you'll get a warning. You will get a warning on processing centers and in all screens that do credit card processing whenever you are using customer payment method. So for AIM plugin and for CIM plugins, you get this warning that they are going to be deprecated, and user is required to use SRIs.NET API plugin. Well, of course, this is shown only for plugins developed by Acumatica, but I also wanted to give you a heads up about this in case any of your users will be curious about that. Okay, so that's it from my side, and now we are ready to do Q&A.
All right, this is Mark Franks again. I'm going to go through, there are 9 open questions and 3 answered. So I'm just going to go through the answered so that the recording can pick this up and we can validate the answers. So Yuri Zaletsky asked, is it possible to customize screen where the user enters credit card information, for example, add additional field?
Dmitry answered that accidentally,
well,
so let me...
Yeah, actually he said, sorry, I clicked and answered accidentally. So he didn't really answer.
Okay, so let me do that. This screen where we enter credit card information, actually not an Acumatica screen. It's an external screen. In our case, it's a screen that is hosted on authorized.net servers, and this is only shown in an iframe. So this depends really not on Acumatica, but on the external system you are integrating with. In case of authorized.net, the customization capabilities are really slim, so you maybe can change the caption, colors a little bit, but that's it. The set of fields is predefined more or less, and you don't have control over that. But that's for authorized.net. If you are using any other payment gateways, then that, well, can be different.
So Harsha Sarapur asked, can we accept credit card payments on the customer portal in 2019 R1? Dmitry answered, not with pure Acumatica. Some ISV solutions do that. So.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Yep. So now going to the 9 open questions. Steve Hoffman asked, synchronized deletion. If the payment method on a customer is deleted from Acumatica, it will then delete it from the processor, correct? This is on the processing center screen.
Yes, that synchronized deletion controls that behavior. So if the checkbox is set to true, then when you delete the customer payment method in Acumatica, it also gets deleted on processing center side. But you can remove that checkbox, and if you do that, then deletion will be happening only on Acumatica side, but information on processing center side will stay intact.
Okay, thank you. So an anonymous attendee, possibly a spy, asked the question, how do you request for Acumatica to add a new payment plugin for another gateway or merchant processor?
Okay, so really there is feedback Acumatica.com site for that. And the other way is actually you can request one of our ISV partners to develop that for you. And I think the second option will be a much faster way because, well, in Acumatica currently we're not focusing on developing new plugins on our own. We're rather focusing on extending the core functionality and new features that our partners then can build upon in their own plugins.
Okay. So Jerry Williver asked, sorry if this is a dumb question, but all our clients are wholesale. I noticed the payment was still open after the credit card payment. Does it need to be released to complete it?
Well, it's already released. Open status means that payment was not yet applied to any invoice. So it means that it has open balance on it. So we release it. It means that we did all the GL transactions for that payment, but then with the next step that we can do, we can apply it to invoices so that we cover the AR customer balance with that payment, for example. So yeah, it doesn't need to be released. It needs to be applied later.
Okay, thank you. And Yuri Zaletsky asked, another question that I have, is it possible to change display format for the CVV code instead of clear numbers to show stars?
Well, this depends on where you want to change that display format. In Acumatica, we don't really store CVV for new plugins, but for all the plugins there is this setup on payment methods. Just let me show it.
Okay.
Okay, so if we go to payment methods, yeah. And if we select an older payment method that actually has CVV displayed, for example, yeah, Visa. So here we have, okay, so in this case, yeah, no, we also can do that from the user interface. You can try doing that with customization if you really need to. So there is this PixUI, there is this attribute mask display, if I remember correctly, that you can override and modify the behavior. It has several parameters passed to the constructor that well, you can use to modify it. So you can go that way if you really need to. Well, as if you are talking about that screen where I entered credit card data, as I mentioned before, this is a screen from external system and we have little control over that.
Okay, thank you. Tuan Vo asked, where is the credit card info persisted? Is the Acumatica database or in the payment portal?
Well, for newer plugins, credit card data is persisted in the payment portal, and on Acumatica side only the so-called token is persisted with actually ID for credit card data. In older plugins, in AIM plugin, which we're going to deprecate in the next release, in this plugin the credit card data is stored in Acumatica. Yeah, well, actually, not all of it. We are stripping CVV after first authorized transaction anyway, but credit card number and I believe expiration date are stored in Acumatica if you're using that plugin and older interfaces.
Okay,
actually, Mark, I think we skipped one, no, from Sharif?
Well, it was an answer. It was an answer rather than a question,
okay.
So that's why I skipped it.
Okay.
So the next one is Sean Strayer. He asked, so are hosted forms from the payment processor required for PCI compliance?
Well, this is a bit complicated question. The short answer is that it will be much easier for you to be PCI compliant if you use hosted form, because you are delegating all that security measures required for storing sensitive credit card data to external processor, and you really don't store anything related to that on Acumatica side. But well, technically you can go through all the certification to show that even if you store it on Acumatica side, you are compliant. But that usually takes a lot of effort, and well, in my opinion, in most cases is not worth it. So if you want an easier to be compliant easier, then your option is to store this data in external service that is already certified to be compliant.
Okay, thanks. Yuri Zaletsky asked, are there any limitations on the number of credit card processing calls?
Well, there are no built-in limitations on Acumatica side. There might be limitations on external service sites, depending on the service. Well, if you're trying to do some credit card processing via API calls, for example, API calls to Acumatica, I mean, so you're trying to capture something on payments, for example, using API calls, there are limitations on those calls. But yeah, that's not related to credit card processing as it is.
Yeah, so he clarified by saying limitations equal limit by number of calls, comma, license limitations. So
in license limitations, there are nothing related to credit cards processing specifically. So it's more general stuff.
Okay. We have 3 more questions. The anonymous attendee asked, when will accepting ACH/e-check payments be on the radar? I didn't catch the time frame.
So earliest time frame is 2020 R1, but it's just an assumption for now. We need to see how implementation of that more generic synchronization process will go. If it goes without much issue and we released more or less complete feature set in 19R1, then we will be looking further to implementing new features there. If there will be some stuff that we would like to finish first, then it probably will be moved further away.
Okay. Sharif Ahmed asked, if we have an order in completed status after shipment confirmation, is it possible to capture the payment on sales order still? We now found that pre-authorization details disappears. So if we have a capture of the payment after the order is completed, the only way is to create payment on Payments tab in SO, in the sales order.
Yeah, well, I believe that currently that's still the case. Once the order is completed, you cannot do that straight from the order. Actually, thanks for the question. We will look into if we want to do something about this behavior in future versions.
Okay, great. And the last question we have is Sai Kumar Chetiar. Hopefully I'm not getting your name incorrect. Some payment gateways have complex processes around hosted forms. Would it be fine to use a smart panel to capture the data and use it to generate the token and then work with the token only?
Well, it all boils down to PCI compliance. So technically you can be compliant when you're using that smart panel. And if well, you are ready to go through that process, then it is fine. The hosted forms are much easier when it's related to compliance, as I mentioned earlier. So if you're using hosted forms, well, you are compliant more or less automatically. If you're using smart panels, there can be some additional well, stuff you need to do on your side to be compliant.
Yep. And there's one more. I don't know if this is an answer or a question per se. Anna Nestorova just put in, authorization is moved from sales order to sales order invoice. I don't know if she was referring.
Yeah, I think she's answering Sharif's question. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
that's what I think too. So just wanted to get it
Yeah,
in.
so yeah, and another way to do that for Sheriff is to use SO invoice, and then it's possible to capture payments there instead of creating it on sales order.
Yep,
So that's
and that's what she
another
said in
approach.
the next line is it can be captured there. So, yep.
Okay.
I think that's it. So great job. Appreciate everyone spending some time with us. And we're recording this, so when I have a chance to do some editing, I'll get it up on the site. So if you came in late, you'll be able to watch the
Mark,
beginning. Yes.
one more thing I forgot to mention.
Sure.
So we have this small survey we want you to participate in. It's related to some specific of how your customers are using credit card payments. It's really small, and it will be sent out to you after the webinar. So please take your time to pass it. It will take only a few minutes of your time. We will appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll be sending that out afterwards. So. Okay, so I think that's it. Again, I appreciate everyone showing up for our first in a series of many webinars from the engineering development team out of Moscow. Really appreciate the time you spent, Vladimir, preparing this, as I'm sure everyone else is. I thought it was great. Thank you very much. And we'll see you Monday if some of you are going to, that's our next webinar. So we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.